Welcome everyone to Natty News, the nattiest news show in the world. I'm Anwar and I'm joined with my wonderfully, possibly natty co-host, Pat Wu. And Pat, today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Lord Zain Kanani. And so, for those of you who don't know, Zain is probably one of Pat and I's closest friends. I knew Zain since kindergarten, and since like grade 8, me, Pat, and Zain have always been really good friends. We've lifted together, we've done a lot of cool stuff together, and just a great guy. And Zain, you didn't mishear me, he's a doctor in pharmacology. And me and Pat, even though we're natty news, we always are tempted by the dark side, the non-natty side, the PED side. So we wanted to bring Zain on to maybe give us a little bit more explanation of like what is a PED, what is a steroid, what's the good and the bad? Are we wasting our time being natty, or is there actually a reason to do all of this suffering instead of just pumping some clen and tren and getting to 500 pounds lean? So,
Zain, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Zain. I'm a doctor of pharmacy, which is slightly different than pharmacology. Just to clarify, I am licensed and working in British Columbia and Canada now. So hopefully I can bring some insight to natty news. Yeah.
But you are a lord, right, Zain?
I am a lord, yes. I am harvesting titles as we speak. I'm a lord of Glencoe, I believe, somewhere in Scotland. Yeah.
Do you prefer us to refer to you as doctor or as lord?
Both.
All right, we'll remember that.
Lord Doc.
What's
Lord
the next,
Doc Zain.
What's going to be the next title on the list?
I don't know yet. I gotta think about it. What is it? What do engineers have a title?
No, I mean, you can get the PN at the end of your name, but I don't think that's that cool. And also, it's kind of like if you actually make people say that, like, "Oh, I'm Adam the Nanny PN," that's kind of pretty lame. Like,
I would say the same if you have a doctorate in anything. Yeah. Like I've never come across a doctor that insists on calling them doctor. You do out of respect or whatever, depending on the scenario. But if you ask for it, then it's
an ego stroke.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever gone on LinkedIn and you see someone's name and it's just like alphabet soup at the end. It's like MBA, PN, CPA, certified CFA. Like it's just like a ton of stuff after the name. It's like, oh my goodness, do I need to say all of that when I say your name?
Yeah, I when I give a lecture at UBC when I'm like 55 years old, I want the first 6 slides to just be about me, so I can tell everyone everything I've done. That's the goal.
Yeah, you just want your tombstone to have like a whole paragraph of the
That's right.
It's gonna start with guest on Natty News. We know it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, again, Natty News, biggest natty show in the world. All right, but anyways, enough of the small talk. Let's get down to the deal. So, Zain, as someone who studied a lot of different drugs, what do you think about the public perspective on steroids and PEDs? Like, do you think the public really understands it, or is it one of those things where it's more complex than what people think?
A lot more complex, definitely. The basics I just want to bring up. The difference between a corticosteroid and a plain old steroid, like an anabolic androgenic steroid. The corticosteroids that you see used all the time. You use it, hydrocortisone creams you use for itchy skin. Prednisone you use for like COPD exacerbations. If you have trouble breathing and you're in the hospital for that, you're going to use prednisone. You use prednisone for so many different things. It's insane. You see it everywhere. And when you say it's a steroid, which it's a corticosteroid, it's a different type, people get scared and they automatically assume, oh, this is not what I want. But it's a completely different class of medication, and it's really important to distinguish that from an anabolic androgenic steroid, which is like what we're going to be talking about more, like the PEDs.
Yeah,
and when go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like no, you hit the nail on the head. Like I think one of the things too is like people instantly think any type of like steroid is just to add mass. Like steroid is just gonna be like you're just gonna blow up and look like Ronnie Coleman when you just inject some steroids. But it's a lot more of a nuanced topic, and even like nowadays SARMs are really popular, and like people just say like, oh, that's a steroid, and it might have a similar anabolic function, but I'm guessing like the molecular level of it is pretty different.
Absolutely, yeah. SARMs are again like not studied too well, but what it does is it works at the androgenic receptor, which is what testosterone and other steroids do. They work at the androgenic receptor and they activate that receptor, and that's what SARMs do technically. So they should have a very similar effect. The positive, well, I don't know if you guys want to go right into SARMs like face first right now or not.
Maybe we'll roll back into it later. We'll get into the steroids first, and just so we're really clear here, Zain. So you're saying that we're all on steroids?
Everyone has a level of testosterone, if that's what you're saying. You are
like if you've ever
I don't believe
cream too. Like you've used steroids.
Well, corticosteroids, they're completely different than the steroids you like testosterone, like a PED steroid.
So let's go.
I'm not Natty anymore. I get it.
Let's start with the top level. So Zain, I actually don't even know the answer to this. What is a steroid? Like, in like the most general term, I know it's probably going to be a hard thing to answer, but what is a steroid to a layman?
Surprisingly, it's not hard to answer. It's literally just a chemical structure, and anything that follows that structure that's made by the body is considered a steroid. Well, it doesn't even have to be made by the body, just anything. And this is the structure that you're going to be looking at. It's a really bad chemical drawing there. It's literally just this 6 carbon hexagons, 2 of them, and then the pentagon up there. That's all it is. If you have that shape and then you have your ketones, your aldehydes coming off it at different angles, that is a steroid. So it's not just testosterone. There's the estrogens, there's the progesterones. There's the most common in your body, probably cholesterols. They're also considered steroids because they have the same kind of structure, and they're all considered steroids technically by definition, like a chemical definition.
I just want to give a small shout out to Mr. Irani for teaching me what that means. I know that's all carbon change of single bond.
Yeah. There are some double bonds in there, but first, depending on the steroid, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, you didn't draw 2 lines.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't draw 2 lines. You got me.
Okay, no, but so that's really interesting. So it's just anything that follows that structure. Now, you talked about how there's different types of steroids. Of course, not all of them for muscle building. What makes the muscle building steroid special? And then you mentioned some names of like common steroids. Like you mentioned cholesterol naturally, and I believe also there's like I can't even pronounce it, nandrolone and like trembolone and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So the ones I mentioned, like the corticosteroids, completely different. Put those out of your mind. They're steroid hormones that are different and they don't work the same way at all. They're not the androgenic anabolic steroids that we're going to be talking more about. So no fluticasone, no hydrocortisone, no prednisone, none of that. It's more so the testosterone and the different forms of testosterone. So like you mentioned, the tren, the stanozolol, dinazolol, all that sort of stuff. And so they all have that base chain of what I showed you there. And then they have different side chains, essentially. They have either like a hydroxide here or like an aldehyde here, and they switch them around and they add an extra carbon maybe, and they give different effects. So the different effects being either they can get more androgenic, meaning they can give more of the back knee you might be hearing about with testosterone. You might get more of the male pattern baldness, all those sort of symptoms, or it can be more anabolic, which is the muscle building side of it. So what these steroids are called are AASs usually, I think is the term that is most commonly used. Pat, you might know a little bit more than me on like what terms are more commonly used.
I've never heard of an AAS actually. What does that stand for?
Androgenic anabolic steroid. So androgenic and anabolic are the 2 like main factors that are going to be playing into this.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So there's all this dinazolol, all trenbolone, all these different types are just variants of testosterone that have varying degrees of anabolic effects and androgenic effects. So here, there's so many different kinds though, and it's just have you guys heard of the designer steroids or designer drugs? I forget.
No, I've never heard of those.
That's a whole other class here. So designer steroids, I think, I don't know too much about this considering it's not something we touched on in school. We didn't touch on a lot of this in school. Is when a athlete or a company is making a steroid specifically for as a PED, essentially to bypass like WADA's or USADA's testing. So they change it in such a way that the metabolites aren't picked up by the testing that WADA would do. And I think that's what the designer ones are were created for that reason, essentially, is just to kind of bypass those. So athletes could end up using these PEDs and not get caught. And of course they have to keep making new ones because USADA and WADA pick up on that, and they try to make new tests to pick up on these designer steroids. And that's why there's some from the 80s and then they're kind of outdated and never used again because they're already on the list and they're going to be caught now. So you have to make new ones repeatedly and constantly to keep bypassing these tests. And like I think I was talking to Anwar about that movie Icarus recently, where that biker tried to try a PED of some kind, and he was talking to some, I believe it was a Russian scientist who was in charge of giving a lot of athletes, like Olympian athletes, different types of PEDs, and he knew the testing because he worked at a testing facility, so he knew which ones and how to cycle it so he can get around that testing. So it's the same kind of idea there, where like everyone is so ingrained and knows so much about these testosterones and different PEDs that you can even use specific ones for certain specific scenarios. And that's where it gets really deep into the pharmacology of like, how long does it last in your system? How prominent is it in your blood? Do you pee it out? Can we use something like a desmopressin to dilute it in your blood? I know that was another drug that not used as a PED per se, but desmopressin, which what it does is usually used in diabetes insipidus, kind of going a little off topic, or bedwetting if you're peeing in the middle of the night in children. What it can do is it can prevent that. So it kind of gets your kidney filters out your blood and takes a bunch of stuff out, all of your toxins, a lot of magnesium, calcium, potassium, all that sort of stuff as well. Desmopressin kind of keeps it in a little bit. So your blood is more concentrated with all of that stuff. And so it dilutes everything that's already there. So the albumin, the hemoglobin, the red blood cells, and your illicit drugs that are in there, potentially, depending on the type. So that's also used, like when to use that, depending on the steroid you used. So it gets really complex and really detailed on how everything is done. And that's why these designer steroids are important and well studied to some extent, I guess. So, I just went off on a long tangent there.
Cool.
No, that was all.
Yeah. Oh, Amber, you go?
Oh, sorry, Pat. No, I was gonna say, first of all, no, that's awesome, and that actually did tie into something I wanted to ask about, was like PEDs and steroids used in professional sports. And also, we should have clarified this for those who don't know. A PED stands for performance enhancing drug, so it could be literally anything that gives you an advantage in a sport. And so I was actually a little curious. So in my mind, I think like 95% of professional athletes are on something. Like they're on something because it's their job. They have to perform at the top level. And I think that. And what people always say, though, is like, oh, there's all these organizations like USADA that are really tough and have all these really intricate testing systems. But you're talking about these designer steroids. How easy, from your understanding, is it to get through the USADA testing with these designer steroids and all this?
So I don't know too much about the specific testing they do. I feel like there's a lot of just corruption in a lot of these areas. Like I don't know too much about it, but I feel like if you understand these testosterones well enough and you understand the testing that goes into it well enough, you could figure out a way to cycle them in a way that you can get around the testing. But I know, at least recently, WADA and USADA have been testing like outside of regular seasons. Like I think for sports especially, that's been a big upcoming thing where on the off season they're doing testing. Pat, you probably know a little bit more regarding that.
Yeah, well, what they do is like they'll just like they don't tell you, they'll just show up to your doorstep in the morning and be like, okay, you got to pee in the cup, and so you got to be ready anytime. So I mean, I think in the U.S. that's prominent. Like I think the U.S., like Canada, like we're pretty tight, but then you'll hear of other countries like Russia, Romania, all the stands countries, things like that. Like they've got a lot of. And they're starting to do retroactive drug testing, right? And that's where I'm guessing, and I don't know too much about it on that end, but like these designer steroids, they fooled people in 2010, but in 2020, now they have the technology to do that. And that's where you see like, you see a lot of people like get their gold medal stripped, or other people move up to gold medal because of a lot of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize they were doing that, but that makes sense, I guess. So with testosterone levels, it varies greatly between person to person, but I think the thinking is that you drop your level generally drops as you age, especially when you get past 20, about 1% to 2% per year. That's based on like the one study I read regarding that specific topic. But and so I guess using that and then kind of estimating, okay, in 2010 they had this testosterone level, and in 2020 they're at a higher level. That doesn't make any sense. They're 10 years older. They're now in their 30s, and their testosterone's going up. Something's fishy. So that makes a lot of sense, and that also makes it a lot harder for people to be using these illicit drugs. So, like, I thought initially that it was easy, and I was with you, Anwar, where I'm like, everyone's going to be using it, just because if you don't, you're left behind almost.
Yeah.
But now with all these high-tech testings, it's also harder. And maybe even luck of the draw to some extent to see if if someone cares enough to call you out and test you, and you get that random testing and you get caught, and it's hard to say, I guess.
I want to actually add in a little story. You were mentioning about how they keep track of testosterone levels. There's a very famous UFC fighter called Chael Sonnen, if you're familiar with him. And he was one of the closest people to beat Anderson Silva. And after the fight, they tested his testosterone, and it was through the roof. It was like 4 times the average man. And his lawyer, the argument about it was that he actually didn't go through puberty until that year. So he was a grown man, 185 pounds, that didn't have puberty until he hit like 32. And that was a legal case.
That's okay. Did he win? Do you know if they're like that?
No. Okay. But I just thought that was like one of the funniest excuses.
That's pretty ridiculous.
I actually have another story. I just saw this on YouTube today. Shout out to Zach Tellender. But a female American, I believe she's a sprinter or some sort of a runner, she got popped for testosterone a little while ago, but she recently just came out to kind of talk about it, and her excuse was that it was probably a mistest, and it was probably something from a burrito she ate.
Oh my goodness. There are things that can increase their testosterone like significantly. Like I think there was a test on they specifically said if watching an illicit movie, I believe that was the words they used in the study I was reading.
Yeah.
Versus a normal movie, not illicit or non-adult movie, raised levels by up to 35%, I think, for a couple of hours afterwards or something like that. So like if someone wanted to falsely increase their levels, it's possible, I guess, because I think you are supposed to be like fasted to some extent and not supposed to do any of that right before you get your levels tested. But I don't know too much about the testing there. There's also a Lionel Messi, famous soccer player, who didn't take tests, but when he was younger, a little bit different scenario here, where he was a really short kid. I think he was like 4'6" or something like that at like 12. And his doctor at the time was like, okay, we'll give you HGH because that's what you need. You're you're not growing to your full potential kind of thing. So they gave him human growth hormone. And that's like, I believe, like an accepted fact that he did take it when he was younger. And then he grew up to be one of the greatest soccer players of all time. So it's like his achievements are like blunted almost by the fact, and a lot of people don't give him the credit because of he had that medication, which may have still been clinically needed at the time.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say.
I really don't like that when people kind of take away the achievement for someone who did take PEDs, because it's like he still played all those games. Like,
yeah.
I don't think the HGH is what made him one of the GOAT. It's just like he's just a crazy good player.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I actually wanted to make a comment though about, so one thing you hear a lot is like tainted supplements. So Pat was giving the example of the athlete was talking about, oh, they ate a burrito and increased their testosterone. But you also find people who take tainted supplements that then give the metabolite of one of these steroids. And for me, I always hear that, I'm like, oh, that seems like a BS excuse. Like, that seems a little silly. But kind of from your understanding, could that be possible? Like, is that a real thing?
Absolutely. I think with supplements especially, it's really, you got to be careful if you're an athlete that's going to be tested. I think there are actually people you can talk to, like the testing companies, like your government or whoever is going to be doing it for the Olympics, for example, and like ask them, can I take this supplement? And what you're supposed to do and what they expect you to do is to talk to the manufacturer of the company and be like, are you confident that this is pure and doesn't have any illicit drugs and I will be able to compete? And if you get that in writing from them, then I think you're clear from like, because you didn't know kind of thing, right? And like, I think that you're expected to do that if you're going to be taking supplements and you're at a top level athlete. Because it can happen. And I think there was a study done with erectile dysfunction medications. It was like horny goat weeds and like different types of erectile dysfunction herbs and natural health products, where some of them, like I think it was up to 50% of them, ended up just having the chemical formula, like a sildenafil or a tadalafil, which is Viagra or Cialis, in the actual natural health product. So I'm like, you just had Viagra in your horny goat weed. That's why it worked so well. Like, it was like there was the medication in the natural health product, and that's why it was working so well. So like, it's like, how is that such a big contaminant? But it happens. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did throw things off. There is pretty good testing, at least in Canada, for this sort of thing. But I don't think natural health products are nearly tested as strictly as they should be. It's kind of like free reign, like you put some plants in a pill and they'll be okay with it kind of thing. So it definitely, like, I agree with the testing people that like you should probably talk to the manufacturer, and if they're willing to sign on paper that yes, they're confident, you're okay to take it.
So that's the whole like when you get certain supplements and they say they have the label with like the NSF, safe for sport, like those are the ones that are guaranteed safe to be. So if you were to take those ones and let's say somehow you still got popped for something, it turns out it was the drug's fault, would you not be at fault for that? Because that would be the liability of the drug manufacturer if they made a mistake, right?
Well, that depends. If the medicate, like the whatever supplement you're taking, actually did make a difference, which it could have, just maybe it's not studied well enough that no one knows it well enough to actually make that effect on you, then honestly, I don't think it's anyone's fault at that point. Like, it's a pure product and it just had an effect that no one has studied well enough, and so it caused you to be caught, which I don't think that's anyone's fault. It's just like you were trying to do all you could to get ahead of the game and you got screwed.
Yeah.
But if there was some other product in the supplement that caused you to get caught, then it's definitely the manufacturer's fault. That needs to be rectified to some extent. I don't know how they would, because you still can't compete. Like, you'd probably take them to court and end up with a settlement of some kind, I bet. I don't know.
Cool. I want to take a little bit of a detour back to just talking about the anabolic steroids, and you gave a really good explanation, probably the best I've ever heard on what an androgenic anabolic steroid is. So if I get it correctly, an androgen is basically your testosterone, or the other one that I can't pronounce. So it's the steroids are like it's kind of like testosterone, but it's with like extra side chains. And the reason there's like different ones, tren and clen and whatnot, are they have different side chains which kind of have different effects. I understand that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And then like the different side chains give different effects. So for example, there's a study I'm looking at right now actually, where if you look at stanozolol, it's all a reference to either like some sort of standard testosterone. Like the myotropic abilities, like the anabolic effects are 2 to 3.7 times that of this the reference, while the androgenic effects, which is the ones you don't want, like the acne and whatnot, are 0.3 to 0.5 times that of the reference. So like that's kind of why stanozolol was made, for that reason. Like we want more anabolic effect, less androgenic effect. So it's
Right.
like they changed up stanozolol in a way where when it's broken down and metabolized in the body, the metabolites don't cause the androgenic effect as much, and that's why this whole side chain thing is done. And like they've understood, like if you add hydroxides, I'm not going to show you because I don't want to get it wrong, but like in certain areas, then you know it'll be more androgenic versus less, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
So I have a bit of it might be a simple or silly question, but so it seems though like when I hear those numbers, like okay, 3.5 times compared to the reference of um I can't even remember the names, but it seems like there's more good than bad. But then what's kind of the problem? Like, is it something like it could be too much? Like, could you get too much anabolic stimulus and just kind of throw off your body? Like, oh, is it sustainable? That could you be taking like these steroids for your whole life without any serious problems if they have very minimum androgen effects?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're using it for, I guess. So if you have, for example, maybe like a really short, intense cycle that you're working on because you are going to be tested really quick, maybe you want a really strong anabolic effect in a short period of time. So you want something like with a higher anabolic effect in that short period, so you can use it for a short burst, work really hard, maybe, I don't know, make a lot of gains, and then go off it really quick. If you have a longer time, then you probably want something that isn't as strong, because if you keep pushing your body to that highest level consistently, you're just going to end up with higher side effects. And when you get off it, the withdrawal effects are going to really hurt, especially if you're going to be trying to compete. So it comes down to like the length of time you're using it for, what you are using it for. And like, again, it's not something you want to use all the time just because your body's going to get accustomed to it. And then if you get off it, that's just withdrawal effects going to hurt you.
So something I've seen, something people see a lot, especially with professional bodybuilders, is that if they look at them now, they're like they just look normal people. Like if you look at any like Mr. Olympia, they all kind of just look like standard people who might like to go to the gym sometimes, but they're not like these 300-pound mass monsters anymore. So is it kind of true that like once you get off of any type of like steroid, anabolic steroid, it's just kind of like your gains are gone, like your body can't support that production of like muscle, or like what's kind of the process of when you get off it? Because everyone knows you go on anabolic steroids, you bulk up, but what happens when you get off it? Why do we see this huge muscle loss in people when they get off roid?
I think a big part of it is just they're not working as hard to maintain it. They don't need to eat the 10,000 calories a day or whatever it is, and because they're not competing anymore, right? Like it's not so. Definitely, they stop taking the drug. That's a big part of it, but they also stop trying to maintain that physique. So that they're definitely going to deteriorate at that time because they're done. They've competed, they've won, they've lost, whatever. They've hit their peak, and now they just need to maintain and live a healthy life. And a healthy life usually consists of a normal amount of food every day with normal macros and not insane Mr. Olympia level diets, right? So it's definitely, that's a big part of it, right? It's just they're going back to the baseline, which is going to be a standard person. And then
Go ahead.
It's really hard to say though. It's like there are certain studies that say effects of steroids can last up to 10 years in the body. And it might be true if you're consistently working hard to push yourself and keep pushing yourself. Maybe you can maintain some of those gains that you would never have gotten unless you took those steroids 10 years ago. I wouldn't doubt that, but at the same time, it's like, it really depends. If you took steroids for 5 years at a pretty high level and you got really strong and now you stopped 5 years ago, but you're still working really hard to maintain those gains, I'd say, yes, you still have some gains of steroids left over because you were taking them for such a long time and you worked so hard. If you took them for 1 month and you worked really hard and it's been 6 years since you took that 1 month of 1 month course cycle of steroids, then maybe I'd say, okay, maybe you'd be considered somewhat natty at that point, because it's been a short course and it's been so long. It's really hard to say, and it's not my place, I don't think, to really say. But yeah, that's a big part of it, I guess, is how long the course was, maybe even what type you took.
Cool. A little follow-up point on that, I think, is and this is on me not knowing much about how steroids work, but when you work out as a natural athlete, from what I understand, you don't create new muscle cells. Rather, you hypertrophy, or you make bigger the amount of cells you have. Now, with taking anabolic steroids, do you have the ability to create new muscle cells? Because that's always a question I kind of wanted to get cleared up.
That's a good question, and I don't believe so. I think it's just more hypertrophy is what testosterone does, and that's what the anabolic steroids would do as well. It's just more and more hypertrophy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding, because it's more muscle mass, and it's the same hormone that's already in your body. It's just you're getting more of it. So if naturally your body can't make more muscle cells, then adding more of that same hormone, it's the same idea. It's just going to give you a greater effect of making those muscle cells bigger and bigger. At least that's my understanding of it. I don't know the exact answer to your question, if it's a yes or no. My guess would be definitely a no.
So one thing at Natty News we want to talk about is, if someone has taken PEDs but then stops, do you think they could ever be considered natty again?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, again, it's kind of like how long they took it and what they took and that sort of thing. I feel bad if like a 19, 20-year-old kid took some testosterone for a month and hated it and regrets his choice, and now he's like 32 and he's working really hard and he's swole as heck, but he's not considered natty because he took that 1 month course of stanozolol back in his early 20s, and now he can never be considered natty and can never compete. Like, that kind of sucks. And at that point, I feel like he would be considered natty in my mind, considering like he's worked for it. It's been long enough. And I do think, yeah, at that point, if it's 10 years, I think anything past 10 years is probably, in my mind, is probably considered like you're good. But it's hard to say whether or not they still have they would reach those heights without having had that course of testosterone or PEDs. It's yeah, it's hard to say.
If you recall, oh sorry, Pat, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So following up on that, now obviously 10 years, that's pretty long. For most athletes, that probably spans the middle of the career to the end of it. Yeah. But now, what would you say if it was? Because this is very common, right? Athletes get drug bans from sports. This is super common, like things like sprinting. Guys like Justin Gatlin and weightlifting and whatnot. And you'll get like maybe like a 2-year ban. Now, with a 2-year ban, when you come back, do you think that gives them a significant advantage compared to someone who has never taken PEDs? Let's say, assuming all other things are the same in terms of physiology, ability, training status, money, and whatnot.
I don't know how significant. So you're still getting tested and not using PEDs in those 2 years. That's the thinking here.
I don't know if you do. I think when you're on a drug ban, I don't know if guys are showing up at your door because you're kind of off the list for those years.
Yeah, because if you're off, they're just gonna keep using at that point. Like, what's the point, right?
And that's, I think, that's something that I've heard debated a lot when we talked about kind of drugs and whatnot in school. Is that when you put a guy on a drug ban, what's to say they don't just start juicing to the gills until they're ready to come back? Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. And you've seen athletes get multiple drug bans. They come back, they get another drug ban, and they come back again, and you're like, what are the chances they're actually natural now, right?
Yeah. Like, at that point, I don't even know. But assuming that they didn't use in those 2 years, I would still say they have some edge, even from like the prior 2 years that they may have taken it.
Right.
Just because the other guy potentially took nothing at all.
Yeah.
I would still say there might be some benefit there. It's really hard to say. I don't really know. like it's not like it stays in the body that long, nowhere near that long. But
Mhm.
the gains that you made while you were on it, they might stick around for quite a while, as long as you keep working hard to maintain it. Again, you might not have reached those heights without the help of that drug, and then maintaining is a little bit easier sometimes than getting there in the first place. Like, I'm sure both of you, including myself, we hit plateaus when we're working out all the time. We're like, I'm stuck at my 315 deadlift. I'm stuck at my 2-plate bench or whatever it is. And like, you just can't get past that rut, and you can keep trying and trying. And eventually you will, with enough hard work. I'm sure anyone can get past that plateau, but this will help you get there a lot quicker. And once you're there, you can maintain that a lot easier. Right. So that's kind of how I see it.
So, Zain, I'm going to be a bit of a natty nemesis right now. And I'm hearing all this stuff and all this good knowledge you're giving. And I'm thinking, like, hey, you know what? What if I just blast a cycle for like a year or two, get a ton of gains, then I go back to being natty, and then I can still keep some of those really great gains. And like 2 years, like, that's not going to do too much damage to my body. So, like, I can get a lot of benefit, a lot of bang of my buck without sacrificing too much. What would be kind of like, I guess, your counter argument to that?
Oh well, the side effects of the of taking steroids in general. So,
Like,
um,
sorry, I mean, like, would there be a significant amount of side effects for doing like a shorter cycle, like for like a year or two? Or is it going to be like, is it mostly we see people getting serious side effects from prolonged use, or could even just be a single cycle really affect the longevity and quality of your life?
maybe not the longevity. I can't say for sure you're going to live a shorter life by taking a year's worth of a steroid, or an AAS specifically. But it really depends again on which type you're taking. If it's been studied well enough and is uh, not something that's completely insane. Like, you're not taking the super high doses. You're taking something manageable. But you're still going to have the side effects that you're going to have to face, like the back knee, the baldness, all that good stuff. And then when you stop, you're going to have to either taper down slowly, or you're going to have withdrawal effects as well. So things to watch
Yeah.
out for there.
So what usually happens with those withdrawal effects? Is it just a natural growth hormone level drop? Like, what kind of things can come with that? I know that beyond just muscles, like, I think testosterone has a lot to do with like mood and this and that. So I'm kind of curious to see what you think about those effects with the withdrawal.
Yeah, so testosterone, I believe it's also can increase aggression and all that sort of stuff as well. Cardiac effects. A lot of my research is with TRT specifically, so testosterone replacement therapy. So it's not like super high doses and levels of testosterone. So the side effects are going to be different, and the long-term effects will be different as well. But I want to clarify here. So human growth hormone and testosterone are two different hormones. Human growth hormone is a peptide hormone that grows everything, your organs, your bones potentially as well, and that's why that was given to younger children that are like failing to thrive or failing to grow, or they are things like that. If they haven't hit puberty yet, kind of thing, they can help grow and kick that into gear. So that's a little bit different, and you don't have withdrawal effects from taking HGH for the most part. But with that's one thing. And then the reason for that is because as you get older, your body doesn't make as much human growth hormone. So if you give yourself a bunch and then you take it away, your body wasn't making much anyway. So there's no withdrawal period because it was already low, and now like it's still low, no difference almost. Testosterone, your body makes a standard amount, whatever it is for your body, for your physique and the type of person you are. When you start taking exogenous testosterone injection, whatever it is, your body's going to make less in response because everything is working in a balance. So if you have more from an outside source, the internal source is going to make less as in response, because you don't need any more. You don't need to make more because you're getting some from outside. So when you stop taking that exogenous source, your body's still making that lower level of testosterone.
Oh,
So
I see.
You need to give it time for it to kick back up into gear and start making more and back to its normal level. That's
Right.
why you have those withdrawal effects, right?
Right. But so to my understanding, the the anabolic steroids, they have that big withdrawal effect. And the HGH, you could say that like an advantage is that it doesn't have withdrawal, but you just mentioned that it grows everything, right? So
Yeah.
how does that affect a person negatively? Like how is that positive or negative to your health to have everything start growing in your body as an adult?
Yeah, as an adult, it's mostly all negatives. That's the reason your body stops making it at a certain age.
Yeah.
It's like more than just like growing your organs, your cheeks, your ankles, your forehead, all of those bones also start to grow. I'm sure you've seen like specific famous people with just massive foreheads, and they call it. A lot of people are credited to HGH and the
Yeah.
cardiomegaly. Like what's his name? That
Rich
you guys
Piana?
yes, he had like a massive heart, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was probably due to the HGH. But he's completely natty.
Yeah.
And then there's it potentially can also grow tumors. I think the research that I read said there's no hard evidence to say it causes tumors, but if you already have one, it's going to grow it as well. So if you either have like a predisposition to cancer from family or have any sort of cancer already, that's going to make it worse. Carpal tunnel is a big one as well. It'll inflame the nerve right in your wrist there. And that can cause trouble with your wrist and movement. Diabetes is another big one. And then, but it's still used medically for failure to thrive, cachexia in like patients with HIV and cancer when they're just like not eating and they're kind of wasting, or even post surgery and they can't eat and they're wasting. I think dwarfism as well, potentially, maybe.
Right.
And then at lower doses, I think it's also considered a fat burner, where you can, if you use it at really low doses, you can lose some fat with it. But it's just, it gets a bunch of IGF-1 release from the liver. It just gets IGF-1 receptors around everything and all your organs and all your muscles, and everything grows. And
I mean,
mostly negatives, I would say.
Yeah.
You do see a lot of like HGH gut in bodybuilding, especially like in the 2010s. Like people would always see those bubble guts, and I think the majority of the reason is because of abuse of HGH. Like you have all those organs in there that are just gigantic, that's taking up so much room.
Absolutely.
Man, that's crazy. Like, I mean, I guess none of this is super secret knowledge, and it's crazy to think that professionals are still taking this stuff. I mean, you just told me that, just off the top of my head, you can you can basically give yourself heart failure. It can grow tumors, right? And then it makes all your organs bigger. Like, I mean, that itself is like, it's crazy to fathom that, first of all, that any bodybuilders want to take it, and that anyone, whoever their dealer, pharmacist, whatever, is actually allowing them to do it. That's a huge problem. It just, these guys are killing themselves doing that.
Yeah, it's insane. But like when you get to that level of sport, you need it, honestly. Like you're not gonna.
Everyone's doing it. Hey?
Exactly. You're not gonna be able to compete at that intense level without every single ounce of support or help or whatever you can get. And you might think, like, when you look at people that aren't on HGH, they don't have that gut, and you think, oh, he looks better than this guy at Mr. Olympia, but he wouldn't win Mr. Olympia ever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's two different competitions almost. It's like I'm sure, like Pat, there's physique, and then there's different types of bodybuilding competitions, right?
Right. So if you're doing that in Mr. Olympia open weight class, or even like the 210s or whatever, I guess I guess men or women, I guess you just have to take the HGH, and I guess that's where the problem stems for, and that's why there's been people calling that you got to bring it back to a more scalable size, because it's not only is it, a lot of people say it's not aesthetic, which is debatable, but also it's just bad for everybody's health.
Exactly. Like, and the only way to really fix that is just better testing, I guess. Like, I don't know how else to really enforce that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, what this means is in 2030, we have to launch the Mr. Natty bodybuilding show.
Absolutely. No roids. They're just kind of a bunch of withered 6 foot, 170-pound people Duking
And
it out.
we're gonna go by the honor system. I don't want to bother anyone, make them pee in the cups. It's gonna be 100% honor system.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's gonna be Pat's gonna win every year though. So
250 lean every year. Definitely not taking anything. Yeah, I drink. I drink creatine.
250 lead.
Oh my goodness. Kind of on this whole topic about like getting off roids. A YouTube channel that I always love is Pete Rubish, and for those if you don't not aware, he actually completely took off all PEDs and is natty now. And so he was kind of like talking about the process of going off of it, and he was just talking like the mental effects of getting off testosterone is huge. Like it kills your motivation to train, it kills your drive to like lift heavy or lift hard and all that. Like he was saying that he had the testosterone levels of like an 80-year-old grandmother. So I feel like a lot of the loss of gains is because of that, and especially like it's kind of sucks imagining every time you go to the gym you're going to be weaker. Like every time you work out, you're gonna get weaker and weaker and weaker, and that's just like a depressing thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really sad. Again, that comes back to the withdrawal, where like your body's not gonna make nearly as much, at least not right off the bat, because you've been given it so much from outside sources, right? And
Yeah.
it's just, and actually that TRT is used potentially for some of those symptoms as well, or can help with some of those symptoms of like motivation, quality of life, and all that sort of stuff. Like it can make you in depression. It can potentially make all those. Evidence isn't great for it, but it can affect all of those things for sure.
So I actually would love to talk about TRT. So we talked a lot about anabolic steroids, and TRT, I think it's gaining a lot of popularity. You're seeing a lot of men in their like 30s, 50s going on it and say wonderful things of it. Even our very first Natty Hall of Famer, Scooby, is on TRT. And from my understanding of TRT, the idea of it is like we're not giving you crazy test levels. We're kind of giving you the same levels you would have in like your mid 20s and 30s while you're in like your 30s and 50s. And so it's not like, would you consider it, like, what's your opinion on TRT overall?
Overall, if you have the symptoms that and clinically low testosterone, it's fine. Like you supplement away, and if you feel better and it's actually helping whatever negative symptoms you're having, great. If you're doing it just to make more gains kind of thing, I feel like it's unnecessary at that point. Like I don't like, I'm a pharmacist, yeah, but I try not to tell people to take medications for the most part. Like the less you can take, the better. That's kind of how I go with it. It's like with pain for myself, I try not to take anything most of the time for most things, but like if you need it, you need it. If you're like with women, when you hit menopause, you're good. You can have hot flashes. You can have a lot of different effects with menopause, and a lot of the time, what you end up giving them for the symptoms is estrogen therapy. When you hit menopause, your estrogen levels start to drop, dip, and that's going to cause all your side effects. And that's why estrogen therapy helps there, is because it'll help with those effects. But there's a trade-off there. With estrogen therapy, you have greater risks of not cancers, but osteoporosis and different things like that. So it's the same with testosterone, where if the side effects are really bad and you're willing to take it because the side effects of low test are that bad and they're affecting you, your quality of life, go for it. If there's no effects at all and you just have clinically low test and you just want to take it, I don't think it's worth it at that point. And I think the doctors here for the most part would agree, where it's not necessary.
Yeah, I've heard before. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Pat.
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask, it sounds, I'm sure a lot of listeners listening, they're like, okay, well, in our older age with dropping test levels, dropping muscle, dropping sex drive, like that sounds like a magic pill. And a lot of people are going to have a big appeal to it. What might be some medical conditions or lifestyle factors or things where like you really should reconsider before thinking about TRT?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's,
Pat, I just want to say these are some great natty minds, because that's what I wanted to ask too.
Perfect. It's us in 30 years. These are personal questions.
Yeah, that's true. There's so much going on with TRT. Like, if you're taking it, for example, you need more motivation, you need to go to the gym more. That's a lot of it can be like a therapy thing, a mindset thing. That sort of like just kind of get yourself in the right mindset. That can be a big part of it. And then there's also other factors that come into play. Just because you have these effects doesn't even mean it's due to the low test. It could be so many other things. You could just have clinical depression. You could just have maybe you just have a shitty life. Maybe you're living, you have a really bad job. There's too much stress. You can't pay your rent. Like, all of these things can add up, and you can have a poor quality of life because of that. It's not necessarily going to be because of this one level that you saw on your lab readings that it seems to be low. You have to take everything into account, everything in your kind of in your life that's affecting you in different ways. And after you've ruled everything else out, that's kind of when you want to start looking to taking medications, is my thinking. Try to change your lifestyle as much as you can. That will help in that sense. So with working out, you're not going to be motivated to work out if you just don't go. You have to force yourself to go at least a little bit. And then, as you guys have mentioned in some of your episodes, when you start to see those gains go in, you start making a little bit of progress. That's when you really start wanting to go more, because you're making that progress. If you don't go, you're not going to make the progress. You're not going to have the motivation. So you need to kind of get yourself into gear and take that first step. You can't expect to just take a medication and give you that first step, if that makes sense. It'll help for sure, but it's just, well, maybe not for sure, but it can help. It's just not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I feel like TRT does have this reputation as being like just a magic thing. Like, don't worry about feeling old or anything. When you get old, you just take TRT and you'll be fine. But I think people do not discuss the real side effects and damage it can do to you, and how it's like you do have to think about that. Like, is all of the gains worth the side effects? And can I get maybe similar results without having to inject it? Like, maybe if I change my diet, maybe if I adjust my work schedule or change some of these other factors, I can still gain a lot of benefits without having to take TRT.
Yeah. On topic, but a little bit off topic, is different studies and articles that are going to be coming out. Like, I was reading a study earlier, and if you just read the abstract and the conclusion, it'll say, TRT is shown to improve quality of life, prevent depression, all this sort of stuff. And then maybe potentially it doesn't really have good evidence for even causing cardiovascular death or myocardial infarction, heart attacks, maybe erythrocytosis, which you have too many red blood cells. But again, like, minimal side effects, and it'll say all this stuff about, oh, it improves quality of life. And then when you look at the data, I was reading this, and there was a meta-analysis of a bunch of RCTs put together, kind of thing, where it puts together a whole bunch of studies and says, okay, this is what the data is. Yep. And for it was looking at, like I mentioned, quality of life, depression, all that sort of stuff. And it shows, for example, so what it does is it compares placebo to a type of TRT that was given. And it says, compare quality of life. And first of all, how do they even measure quality of life? They're using all these different different scales. Some of them are definitely going to be accredited and like properly tested and whatnot, like and then some of them are just going to be random scales that they came up with themselves. So like, it's hard to say if it's even accurate. And then when you look at the data, it says when you're comparing these two things, you end up putting it through the statistics and everything and put in the computer, it'll spit you up a number, let's say 0.2 or negative 0.2 in this case. Negative numbers here are improvements in quality of life. But then you look at the, so a negative 0.2 is good. You're increasing your quality of life by negative 0.2 points, whatever that is based on the scales you're using. But when you look at the confidence interval, the 95% confidence interval, if it includes 0 in this case, which it does in most of these, for example, the range would be 0.2 to negative 0.4, let's say. That's the range. And then the middle ground that they said was around like 0.1 for negative 0.15 or whatever. They say in the study that yes, this improves quality of life, but when you include 0 in that confidence interval, it's not statistically significant. You can't statistically say that this definitely causes an improvement in quality of life. When I was looking in the studies, a single study showed a statistically significant difference in quality of life versus the 17 others, which were like not statistically significant. They still showed improvements for the most part in most of them, but they weren't big enough improvements to say, yes, this was because of the medication. So like, if you look at the abstract and the conclusion, it says straight up, there's evidence to say it shows an improvement in quality of life. So a single study showed that statistically that it did that, as opposed to like the 17 others that wasn't statistically significant. So like a lot of the research here is just, it might be well done. It's not big enough. Maybe there aren't enough patients. The sample size is too small to give you a hard answer. That's yes, it improves quality of life. Yes, it reduces depression. Yes, it gives you a better sex drive. All of that stuff. Like there's not even good evidence to say it does all of this, but it has that reputation already. And because of that reputation, people don't care about the evidence anymore. Like, and it's not just, like the reputation. Everyone thinks testosterone, oh, that's the manly hormone. I'm going to get manly. I'm going to take it. I'm going to be a big man. I'm going to grow hair on my chest. And like, it's not necessarily going to happen that way. Like the evidence is not, it's not there. And that's just one meta-analysis I was looking at. There's a lot of other ones that show different outcomes. Like quality of life's a bad outcome to look at anyway, just because of how you measure it. There are other ones out there that show definite benefits, and then there are some negatives as well. But it's just like that one I was looking at, and that's the one that would probably be shared on Facebook 100 million times because it shows what people wanted to hear. The confirmation bias of like, is testosterone good? That's if you type that into Google, you're going to find tons of stuff that says yes, it's good. If you don't type in is testosterone bad, you're never going to know the negatives. It's the confirmation bias of people thinking like, oh, let me look up the good stuff here. And then they'll find all the good stuff and they're not going to look up the bad side. And they're stick with the good.
Zain, I just want to say everyone here is just listening. The very first conspiracy against big TRT. We are going to take them down. You are literally the next coming of Edward Snowden when it comes to big pharma.
Dude, so I actually read a review. I forget the author's name now. He wrote a review where he analyzed a lot of the studies done on TRT, and the ones that were funded by big pharma tended to show improvements in quality, not quality specifically, but improvements in the positive outcomes, while the ones that weren't funded by big pharma didn't show any significant, statistically significant difference. So like, I don't know how accurate that guy's analysis was, but when I read that, I laughed. I'm like, I don't doubt it, but I would want to read further into it. But like, I would not be surprised if that was the case here, because that when you're analyzing studies, that's one of the things you want to look at is where is the funding coming from? And is it a big pharma company that sells testosterone or not?
That's huge.
I was gonna say this is the first time on Natty News actual news was broken.
It's totally true. And Zain, thanks for breaking down some of the research, because like even though I've learned to read research a little bit, like when you read drug stuff, like I don't know what the heck they're talking about. I don't know like the ingredients, so it's all very confusing to the common person. It's kind of good to get that opinion that testosterone can be good, but it's not magic. And I think, Anwar, you and I would agree. I think before we got on this podcast, I think we had a bias that like testosterone's pretty good. Like we would take it at a heartbeat if our test levels started dropping or if we got old and lost all our gains. And I think this is now having a switch in perspective. Like when the time comes, I should think about it first and read about it or see an expert like Dr. Lord Zain Kanani before we go and make a decision that might lead to some negative outcomes.
Before this conversation, Pat, I thought I would be 60, deadlifting 6 plates, just being loaded on TRT. But now Zain, he's making me second guess that, and thankfully so.
I like how you see yourself when you're 60 stronger than you are now.
Oh, dude, I'm making gains until I die. Like, I'm going to be the single strongest 80-year-old. Actually, I'm living till 100, so I'll be the single strongest 100-year-old in history.
Yeah. The last thing you'll do is deadlift 600 pounds.
No, it's going to be 800 pounds.
Oh, 100. My bad.
Ronnie Coleman at 100 years old. My God.
I'm gonna do a deadlift and then die, and it's gonna be a true deadlift.
Die holding the weight up.
Yeah, and then just don't drop it. I just hold it there, like I just don't move.
We'll encase you in carbonite and leave you there. That's where you stay for the rest of the time.
Oh man. Oh well, I gotta say, Zain, thank you so much for going over a lot of information, and you actually did a really good job in explaining it all. And I think this is gonna be one I'm gonna have to re-listen to Before we kind of wrap up, do you have any kind of last things you want to say or last comments? Oh,
I do
and I
wanna
think Pat has
mention-
something.
Yeah, Pat
Yeah,
does have something.
there's one we forgot the most important thing. How do you sign up for TRT? Like how do you get an appointment for it? How do you get it? What forms do you get it in? And if you know how much it costs, I would love to know about that too, just for curiosity's sake.
So TRT, first of all, you need to get your blood work done to show that you have low levels. You're probably going to get your other hormones, your pituitary hormones, your luteinizing, and I'm forgetting the other one now. Follicle stimulating hormone, your FSH, I believe. You'll get those tested as well, likely. And then you'll see, are you clinically low? And then, or do you have any effects of being clinically low? Are you like poorly motivated or whatever your symptoms you might have? And then the doctor will be like, okay, it might be a cause of the low testosterone. Nothing else seems to be working for you. Let's try this out, and then go from there. You get a prescription for it. So it comes in a oral form, it comes in injectables, and it comes as a gel cream type thing. Depending on where you live, different ones are covered. For Canada, we got universal healthcare. Certain ones are covered. In BC, you do need special authority, which is something where the doctor actually signs a form and sends it off to pharmacare and says, yes, this guy needs this medication, so cover it for him, kind of thing. And that's, again, if he meets the criteria being hypogonadism, orchiectomy, undescended testes, Klinefelter syndrome, if you're doing a female to male transformation, I believe, pituitary tumor, or if you remove your pituitary entirely. Those are like the main criteria. And then there's also if you have like wasting or different types of surgeries where you could have lower testosterone because of it. If you have any of those criteria, then you qualify for special authority. Then you can get it covered through pharmacare and through the government if you need it and that sort of thing. But the ones they cover are only the injectable form here in BC, at least, and the I believe only the injectable form. Come to think of it, actually, I don't think they even cover the tablets or the cream, though I might be mistaken. Yeah, so you would need to get that covered unless you want to pay for it. So the injections are like maybe $100 an injection, and you're going to be injecting maybe once a month, kind of thing. The cream can be quite a bit more expensive. You're looking at maybe a couple $100. Potentially, it's definitely more expensive than you want it to be. But again, it's depending on where you live. Like if you're in BC, then you could be looking at 100 to 200 for the cream, maybe 50 to 100 for the injectable. And it depends on the dose that you're going to be doing, how often you're going to be going, probably every 4 weeks ish. If you want the oral tablets, you're going to be paying out of pocket, I believe, because the government's not going to be covering that at all. But yeah, those are the main forms. And then even the injection forms, there's the cypionate and the enanthate forms, which are very similar, and they're very similar in price as well, just whatever's available, really, most of the time. That's a big thing in pharmacy, is like, it's not always easy to get the medications because the manufacturers keep changing what's available. Like I order something and it just doesn't show up, and I'm like, where is it? And they're like, oh, it's short, sorry. Okay. Now you got to find an alternative. So luckily there's 2 different injectable forms. The cypionate hadn't been available for a while, so like everyone was switching to the enanthate, and then but whatever's available, injectable, tablet, cream are your 3 main options.
Nice. Oh, that answers my question.
All right, awesome. And no, it's always good to know how you get. I'm glad there's creams. I don't like needles, so I'm happy there's a cream you can just use.
Yeah. It comes in a nice little bottle that was like a dispenser on the top too, so it's not like
it's just like lotion. It's just like, okay, let me rub up some testosterone on me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Zain. I think a lot of the listeners are gonna really enjoy this one. I really enjoyed it. But again, any last few comments you want to make on this?
No, I think that's all. I know we didn't touch on a lot of different drugs like the desmopressins and like the diuretics and stuff. I'm sure Pat knows a lot about that, but I'm sure I can come back on another day if you guys want to go over that.
you are welcome back anytime to talk about more drugs, and potentially we might get into supplements next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Make
want to know
pharmacist
if I can make gains on horny goat weed or not.
Yeah, definitely. You got to get a lot of it though, and the real thing straight from the source.
All right. Well, Pat, you got any closing messages for us?
Just the usual. If you're watching us on YouTube, you got to make sure you are smashing our like button and subscribing to us. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you should, because we look quite nice, and you're not going to see Zayn Scooby Doo unless you do that. But if you listen to us on Spotify, leave us a review or send us a DM and let us know what you think. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Well, sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this breaking news edition of Natty News. Big TRT is coming for your gains, and we're here to stop it. Anyways, Natty News out, everyone.
Natty News
Natty
out.
News out.